Hello and welcome to Everyday Lessons Every Day. I'm David McBee. Based on my book by the same name, this podcast is for those of us who believe in personal growth and want to improve every day. In this 2021 season, the stories come directly from people whose lives have been impacted in a positive way by an everyday lesson that they've learned. This is episode 28, Change from Within with Rebecca Clark. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me on Everyday Lessons Every Day, the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
It's great to be here.
So I want to just let listeners know right away that we met through a friend, and I am returning the favor today. You interviewed me for your podcast several months ago, and that was so much fun. And you actually inspired me to start my podcast. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, thank you for doing it.
You use the phrase nudger a lot, like people who nudge you into doing wonderful things. And
Yes.
I consider you a huge nudger in my life. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, thank you. Well, I notice in nudging, there's always a return favor, right? Like there's always a bouncing back and forth of sharing knowledge and experience and insight. So great to be connected that way as nudgers.
Yep. So tell everyone right away, what is your podcast and how can they find it?
Well, it's called Move Your Desk, and they can find it on most major podcast services, actually. And so it's, to help people that are compelled to step up their work to get doing it. So, I use the move your desk, but it really behind it, it's move your mind kind of thing, or to get your mindset right so you can keep pressing forward and becoming a better person, a better worker. And of course, like like talking about how to become better in all aspects of life.
So if people listen to my podcast, they might like yours too.
Yes.
In fact,
They
I'm pretty
might,
sure
right?
they'll go listen to yours and be like, "This is way better than that everyday lessons of garbage."
No.
All right. Well, tell listeners just a little bit about yourself, your family life, your work life. Tell them so they know who they're listening to.
Okay. Well, I am, what would I be? A mid-career professional? I'm not sure.
Mid-career, like because you recently quit your job and
Right.
became a coach, right?
Right. A coach, and I'm figuring that all out, right? Because maybe I'm a coach and something. And so trying to figure that out. But most of my career, I was in the training and development field, and I worked for over 20 years. And then I had a child. So I kind of did things maybe a little backwards than some people, but I had a child in my mid 40s, and that affects things, right? You look at your life differently, I think, when that happens. So you can have this career and you can come home from work and you can read books and you can study and take courses and do all these extra things. And then having a child made me realize I've got to balance some things and also pursue what I think I'm really supposed to be doing in life. And so, kind of having a child helped me take that next step and go, okay, what do I really want to spend my time doing? Especially since it felt like I had less time than before, because I wanted to make sure to put family first.
All right. Well, let's jump into your lesson. Did your lesson come from a book?
Yes, it did.
What book was it?
And well, it's funny. It's kind of a collection of books, but the main book was The Anatomy of Peace. It's from the Arbinger Institute.
That's not one I've heard of. No, that
Oh,
sounds like
okay.
tell us all about it.
This book, The Anatomy of Peace, came out a few years ago. But before that book was another book that I read, which was Leadership and Self Deception. And that is from the Arbinger Institute as well. But I didn't know about the Arbinger Institute because it didn't exist back when I was in college, when I took a psychology class where we were using the basis of a class from a transcript called Bonds of Anguish, Bonds of Love. And that turned into a book that was called Bonds That Make Us Free, Healing Our Relationships and Coming to Ourselves. And what's fascinating to me, I guess I would call this a sequence of nudges, right?
Hmm.
Because one of my sisters and I both had a psychology credit we had to take to graduate. Like I was a minor in psychology, but she had it for her major, whatever. And we went together to take a class together. We thought that would be cool. And we march across campus and walk into this room. And instead of the typical first day lecture, where they're like, okay, here's a syllabus, let's walk through it, it's boring, all that, he gets right into teaching and telling us about how we act and how we react to others and everything. And it was just, it was almost a spiritual experience. We're sitting there going, whoa, what is this class? And the class is lined with people. And we're like, there's no way we're getting in here, but this sounds amazing. But we got in. And from that class is what got me interested in that transcript, which got me interested in the book when it came out, which then I found out that became the Arbinger Institute, and they produce these other books, which led me to The Anatomy of Peace. So hopefully, does that make sense? That whole little
No, that's a
process?
great story. I mean, and isn't that what college is supposed to be? Like to
Right.
really, that's what it's supposed to be. Open your mind to something brand new that you really got excited about. I love that. Yes, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this book, what is so interesting to me about it is that it was written different than the books that inspired me to read it. And it's written in a dialogue format, and it's a scenario where some parents have brought their children to this like 60 days in the wilderness, so they're problem children, quote unquote, that need help. So they're going to go to the wilderness and go through this, boot camp for troubled kids, so to speak, learn about themselves and everything. But what they do is they take the parents and say, yeah, they're going to be here for 60 days, but you as parents are going to sit here for a couple of days to work through some things. And so it's totally focused on the parents, not the children. And they work through how they talk to their children, how those children respond, and they find out that the children's behavior isn't the real problem. The real problem is that inside the parent is at war, it's not at peace, right? And so it takes you through thinking about how you act and react in situations and realize that it's not the behavior that matters as much as how you are coming to the situation where the behavior occurs, if that makes sense. So, one example in the book that's given, the people are sharing their experiences as they're sitting here being taught by these instructors, these parents, and the guy's like, well, she wanted me to mow the lawn and do the hedges. What is that called? Hedging, I guess it's called.
Trim the hedges, maybe?
Trim the hedges. Yeah, I can think of that. And and so he and his wife get into this argument because he's like, "Well, I'm going to go play tennis and I'll do it when I get back." And she's like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure." And they go back and forth. And he comes home and she's like, "Are you going to trim the hedges?" And he's like, "It's dark out." She's like, "Well, you promised that you would do this." And so he marches out to go do it. And one of the points of the story is that the behavior, trimming the hedges gets done, but the way it gets done shows that that relationship isn't going to get closer because he did it, right? She's not just going to go, "Oh, okay, you did it. Great. Thank you. You're awesome husband, blah, blah, blah." No, he's going to come inside from doing that, and they're still going to be bickering or judging or doing all the things, right? So the behavior, he accomplished something, but it didn't change their relationship because they're both coming to it not at peace with themselves, right? They're at war inside with the judgments and the blame and the and that kind of thing. And so that's a tiny example, but these kinds of examples build upon each other, right? Because then the next day when she asks him to do something or he asks her, they're going to take that scenario to the next scenario, and it just slowly builds up more collusion. I think it's an extremely valuable way to present to us how we think, how we feel, how we behave with others, and how sometimes when we're piling up the judgments on others in our lives that are closest to us, it's really our own heart at war with itself because we're not honoring the true instinct we have in us, to be good and kind or to work with people.
So, what would you say the big takeaway from that is? What is the lesson if you had to put it into a sentence?
I think the lesson is that is just one step away. It's a choice, it's a decision, and it's not something someone else has to do. It's something you get to do. You can choose to do it because that's what is going to make the difference in how you show up in life with everyone. That this you don't have to expect anyone else to change, that you can do it. And that there's a ripple effect that naturally occurs and relationships improve. So it really shows, change begins with me. Doesn't matter if the other people are right or wrong. If everybody would agree that they're wrong or that they have horrible behavior or they should have done something else, doesn't matter. What matters is how you show up and that you are not at war at yourself.
And this is why I love you so much, Rebecca. I mean, you speak directly to me and the issues that I have in my life, right? Like I was so angry that my family wouldn't turn off the lights or take out the trash or
Mm,
that they left dishes laying around, and I just let those things fester in me. I let them bother me so much. And it wasn't until I figured out that the only person I could control was myself that I was actually able to change, not them, but change myself and change my environment, I guess my level of happiness. So
right.
I love this lesson. And
Mm.
tell me how, have you applied it to your life? Has it made a big difference for you?
Oh, yes, it's made a huge difference. And it's one of those things where this concept, I tell myself this every year, but I don't do it. Like I think you've mentioned this before actually. There's some books that you should read every year, like over and over. And I think this is one of those books or one like it, just to remind ourselves that, oh, wait, the change begins within, no matter what. I think how it really helped me is, especially at work, there's so many different personality types, and to really be able to step back sometimes and look at some behaviors that were going on, like with a boss or a coworker or other people, and go, wait a second, they're starting to feel threatened, or they are acting that way because of something going on in their mind. Maybe I need to step back and go, okay, how is this from their perspective? What do I need to ask them? What do I need to consider? You come with more compassion to the equation. It doesn't mean the other person is acting correctly, but it means you're showing up differently. And I know this shows up a lot in boss employee relationships. Like if someone thinks their boss is a bully or condescending to different groups of people or whatever, what you start to see is when someone decides that about their boss, they actually show up differently in their interactions with their boss. So, in a normal situation where if you thought highly of a person you're interacting with, if they said or did something, you'd say, "Oh, okay, well, help me understand that," or "Why did you do that?" Or, you just be very casual and conversational. But with a boss you've already decided this about, you're going to show up differently. You might not have eye contact. You might try to find ways not to interact. And at the end, you have a self fulfilling prophecy going on, right? Because you are gathering evidence that this person is wrong or they're against you. And so you actually act differently around them, whether you know it or not. And I'm really taking a look at this right now closely because my child is going through another stage of growth, and I'm noticing he's making certain comments to me that are kind of triggers to me, but also teaching me, wait, he feels he's not being treated well. Like, why is he feeling that way? How am I showing up with him? I think I'm showing up differently. And of course, it was helpful, for you to ask me about the book because I re listened to it last night in very high speed. Right? And I was reminded that, oh, yeah, he is acting in new ways, perhaps because I am showing up differently. I'm coming more with a heart at war, even though my behaviors may be okay. My heart has got something going on with it, and he can feel it. Like I think as human beings, we sense it in another person. There's judgments with that, of course, right? Like, well, I'm sensing they're thinking this of me. They may not be thinking that of you at all, but you feel that and react in certain ways.
Man, that's good stuff. I really I'm supposed to be all prepared to ask you wonderful questions, but I'm just sitting here going, "This is so good. This is exactly what I needed to hear. This is" Okay, let's back up a minute. Well, you said something a minute ago. I think you said, like, it's in our nature to be good or something along those lines.
Mm,
But I'm wondering if you might also agree that it's in our nature to see the worst in people sometimes instead of
yes.
seeing the best in them. And it's my opinion that reading these books that remind us and put us in a good frame of mind, they help shift that.
Yes.
They help us say, okay, they're not a perfect human being. They're not supposed to be a perfect human being. They're doing the best they can.
Right.
And I think that it allows us to give them more grace.
Right. Like when you shared, how I think sometimes we don't look for the best in people, that says a lot about us in that moment, right? Because we're constantly shifting back and forth. I think sometimes we are in that great frame of mind and sometimes we aren't. And a lot of that does have to do with feeding our mind good stuff. But I have noticed, especially this year, as I've gone through all of these transitions, that this comparison game can really bring out the worst in you. So when you start finding those weaknesses in other people, it really is showing you that you're feeling weak or you're feeling insecure or you're feeling less than. And it's translating into how we look at other people. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm really feeding myself a lot of good stuff, I have to watch myself because there becomes such a cognitive dissonance between what I'm learning and then what I go and experience in my family or at work or whatever. So, like, wait, I thought this was going to be easy to implement. And now they're presenting me with this situation where now I'm about to blow up. But I just learned how not to do that. you know and here I am, right after reading this good thing, doing the opposite. And so it is a constant effort.
You know what it is? It's kind of like you go to a spin class and you're around 30 people, not in 2020 obviously, but you're around all these people who have positive attitude about health and their body images and such.
Yeah.
And then you go to the grocery store and you walk down the chip aisle.
Yes.
It's like, okay, here's real life.
Right.
Real life is not the spin class. Real life is not the book I was just reading,
Right.
but I wish it was.
Yeah.
So let's assume that our listeners are hearing a little bit about themselves as they hear your story, right? What advice do you
hmm
have for them?
Well, I think one of the ahas I had as I re listened to this book was when you find yourself deep in the mire of this warring heart with yourself, which automatically starts to translate into warring with other people. Just have compassion on yourself and sit back and take time to reflect and go, okay, what's an example in my life where I showed up in a great way, where I'm not doing this, right? Where I'm not having these experiences with my spouse or my boss or my child. Because all of us can find examples in our life. And if we can find those examples, it can switch our thinking pretty fast, right? Because we go, oh, yeah, I'm able to show up in a different way for that person. Why am I able to do that? How am I thinking differently about the interaction? And it gets your mind going to work for you and finding, oh, there's another way to look at it. Oh, I showed compassion to that person. Why can't I do that with this other person? Or I gave some leeway, or I was willing to teach them, but I'm not willing to teach this person. What's going on with me? That the same brain has the capacity to love this person or teach this person or help this person, but it doesn't for this other person. And what that helps us do is kind of get out of our own box a little bit, right? To show, oh, it's possible. Once we're out of that just a little bit, that can create a ripple effect. As long as we're willing to sit back and go, okay, wait, I'm starting to act out in ways that I don't like. Someone's reacting to me in ways I don't like. What's going on? And we can often find, oh, yeah, I am treating them differently, or I am showing up differently with them. And that can start us on a process of change and growth. And there may be apologies that are needed. There might there might be some difficult conversations, but it's amazing how quickly, when we're willing, to have the conversation with ourselves first and then express this with others, how it can open the doors and there can be great relationships that come out of this. Or you'll be able to work with someone you weren't be able to work with before, or have, an engaging moment with a child or a spouse or neighbor or whomever that we were at odds with. And so just taking that time to notice first that, yes, I have the capability and the capacity already in me, right? Kind of search for evidence in your past that you were able to do this so you can do it again.
That's wonderful advice. I absolutely love it. So before we go, can you share with us the name of the book one more time?
Sure, it's The Anatomy of Peace, Resolving the Heart of Conflict, and it's by the Arbinger Institute.
All right. Well, and if someone wants to reach out to you and get in touch, what would be the best way for them to do that?
I think it would be going to the moveyourdesk.com website, or they can connect on Instagram or Facebook, LinkedIn, all those places. I have a presence. So if you put in Move Your Desk, I'm pretty sure that I will come up. Of course, you would know better than I would, right? Because you know all about social marketing and that kind of thing. But
No, I think you're doing great. I see all your stuff on LinkedIn and all your social media, and I really enjoy your work. So thank you so much for being my guest. I feel really privileged to have had you today. Thank you.
oh, thank you. This was a great privilege. And I learned a lot through the process. So I'm
Is there
grateful for
anything
that.
else you want to say before we close things out?
I think one comment that I did not make that's important is that often we start having this angst in ourselves because we are betraying ourselves. We're betraying an original good thought we had to help another. Sometimes, if we don't make the choice we know is right, we start gathering evidence in our mind to support why we didn't make the choice, and we create more anger in ourselves and more hurt. When really, if we had just acted on the original impulse, it was probably the right thing to do.
That is a solid thought, and that sounds like an entirely different podcast, honestly. Like,
Right,
have you
right.
done a podcast on that theme?
No, but I'm going to now.
You have to. Yes, I'll be looking for it. Be sure and ping me when it's out.
Okay, I will do that.
All right. With that, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I was really moved by Rebecca's message. In fact, if you read my book, you know that trying to change other people is one of the things that caused a lot of conflict in my relationships. It's an everyday lesson that isn't easy to learn, so this reminder was great for me, and I hope you got a lot out of it too. In fact, I'm going to challenge you, write "change from within" on your wrist. And the next time you're dealing with a person who isn't acting the way you think they should be acting, whether those actions are right or wrong, remember that you do have the power to make change. You can't change them, but you can change how you deal with them, how you react to the situation, and how you show up. Let me know what happens when you implement this lesson by reaching out to me personally or posting your story on social media with the hashtag #EverydayLessonsEveryday. And if you like this podcast, please share it with a friend. Let's see if together we can make the world a better place. Finally, if you or someone you know has an everyday lesson that they'd like to share, I'd love to hear from them. Put us in touch. I can be reached at david@davidmcbee.com. I'll see you next time. Now go out there and do something awesome. Sometimes you'd get to the end of a statement and I had nothing else to say because I was just absorbing what you said. I was like, that's so good. Wait, I'm not listening to one of her podcasts right now. I'm supposed to be interviewing. I have to come
Right.
up with a question now.
Right.